Memory, just like creativity, is a mental muscle that must be exercised in order to do any heavy lifting. Memory can be an awesome tool, like that of an actor who must remember thousands of lines in a very long play, or, more to our point, a conductor who memorizes hours of orchestral music and doesn't need a score in order to conduct. But it's not just information storage that's an advantage here. It's also the mental impression of what instruments sound like that's so important, especially to a composer. Having many pieces of music floating around in your head also supplies you with the exact sound of those instruments, which you can use in order to mentally sketch your own ideas with far greater accuracy. Our first assignment will be to memorize the second movement of Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 9. In fact, all of the assignment material for the Audiation 101 course will be drawn from the piano sonatas of Beethoven, as performed by my friend and colleague, Usman Anis. This middle movement in E minor is like a fast minuet, almost a scherzo if some pianists play it faster than the marked allegretto. On the screen, we can see the first half page of this movement. And while I'll be pointing out a few things visually, I do not want you to memorize this piece by score reading. In fact, for this part of the curriculum to work, it's best if you memorize by listening as much as possible, without looking at the score at all. You want to develop the ability to think through and organize musical material in the form of sounds, just as well as written notes. There are several key functions in any well-composed piece of music, most of which we'll touch upon when we return to analyze this piece in our section on active score reading. Here at the beginning of this first cycle of training, though, let's focus on those features that will aid the most in memorization: motives, phrases, and accompaniment styles. A motive is a small group of notes that help to form the fundamental thematic material for a piece of music. This movement's first section uses only two motives. The first is the simplest of all, a dotted rhythm starting on E, dipping down a half step to D sharp and back, and then rising to G. The second has an intriguing mirror-like arc, with a little jagged figure walking down from F sharp and leaping back a third up to the same F sharp, then walking up from E to G, jumping up to B, and finally walking back down to F sharp. It's a little harder to exactly define the word phrase. Sometimes there's very little difference between a phrase and a motive. But in the context of this course, let's use the word to define basic units of organization used by Beethoven himself. In this movement, they're simple to observe, usually occurring in groups of 8 bars. Observe how Beethoven builds 2 complete phrases out of his motives. The first 3 notes of the first motive are repeated before the melody jumps up to a held G. Then the second motive gets us to the dominant chord. This is played exactly the same way twice, an octave higher the second time. It only remains for Beethoven to either reaffirm the dominant the first time, or provide a very standard perfect cadence the second time. Let's remove the notation now and simply look at a chart of how the music is organized. We'll deal with more systematic approaches to understanding and recognizing musical form in the next video lesson. But for now, observe the chart while we listen to the music. I'll highlight each element with the associated section of music as we go. Obviously, there's more to this movement in terms of motives and phrases, but let's save that for now and instead examine the third feature of this video's title: accompaniment styles. In this movement, the accompaniment style is fairly simple and direct, composed of octave melodies, block chords, and some contrapuntal lines. It's not enough to simply memorize the melody line. You must also keep a clear picture in your mind of the entire musical picture. Let's try a little audiation now. Read the score along to the sound of the accompaniment, and fill in the melody you heard earlier in this lesson, that you can also see in the score marked in red. You can sing along if you like, but the best practice for this course is for you to merely think it along to the recording. Try this several times if you need to. Beethoven's Ninth Piano Sonata has several different styles of accompaniment in its first and third movements: repeated chords and bass notes, four-part harmony, alternating notes and simple broken chords, long pedal octaves, arpeggiated triads, and octave chords, to name the most frequent. Of course, these accompaniment styles combine rhythmic and harmonic elements which themselves could be analyzed in detail. But the most important factor right now is to use them as guides in our pursuit of memorizing the 3 or 4 minutes of music that comprise this movement. When we remember the motives that make up phrases and add accompaniment styles, then the most effective element in keeping track of our mental record is to recognize the basics of form, which we'll start studying in the next video lesson.